was like
Were you
psychedelic, jumping all over
floating
the
head?
place. It was psychedelic. It was like I had a life of its own.
Rebecca, in a meeting the other day, her daughter came and was kind of perched over her shoulder, but her shirt made her body disappear. So Rebecca is talking to us, and suddenly this ghostly floating head appears next to her.
Was it Whitley? One of the moderators lost her arms
Yeah.
for some reason. She lost her arms one day.
How tragic.
We have Anastasia and Ali.
All right. I'm showing 10:30. We got anybody in there yet?
2 people. All right, I say the hell with it. Let's go. Let's go home.
Do it.
2 people, not worth. Just kidding. Kidding. I like doing these, actually.
Are we up on YouTube, Sarah? Thumbs up. Rock and roll. Everybody in, Sarah? Good to go? Off we go. Welcome to another Ask Me Anything session with a Pragmatic Institute instructor. So good to have you guys here again. Reminder up at the top, of course, turn your cameras on if you can. We love to see your faces, and it's so much easier to talk to real people. So do that if you're able to. And of course, because this is casual conversation style, feel free to unmute and ask a question if you like, or ask a clarifying question as well if we're given a complicated answer. This is casual time. You're welcome to do it. It's Friday. We're loosey-goosey in here today. Of course, I got to give a shout out at the top here to the Pragmatic Alumni Community, or the PAC, as we call it. It is a fantastic new resource for you. You will find all things product in there, resources, suggestions. Our instructors will show up in there so that you can ask them some more questions as well. Fantastic opportunity. Find out more about that at pragmaticinstitute.com/community. And with that, it is time to introduce Pragmatic Institute instructor, the man, the myth, the legend, Rich Natinsky is with us today. Rich, how are you?
I am awesome, Eddie. How are you
You smile
today?
like nobody's ever called you legendary before, and I know that's not true.
I usually ask my family each day to greet me that way, but they don't
Excellent.
comply. But thank you, Eddie. I appreciate it. A legend in my own mind.
To have you here, at least 2 of us, in at least 2 of our minds. We got some folks in the Zoom with us here. I recognize a couple names. Welcome back if you're joining us again. We are live on YouTube as well. So hello in YouTube land. We can't see you, but thank you for joining us as well. And I've got a few questions here that are pre-submitted. Our Zoom audience, if you want to unmute and ask questions, that is fine. Or you can also just type them in the chat. I'll keep an eye on the chat as we go along and toss them over to Rich as we go. But Mr. Rich, I thought we would start off here with a question submitted by Nathan. Nathan asks this question. I was looking for some suggestions on how to do quality market research when your time, budget, and resources are limited or almost non-existent in our case. I realize we must get creative. Any help is appreciated. What can you do, Rich?
Yeah, Nathan, thank you for that question. Nathan, are you suggesting there are times we have limited time and budget and resources? How surprising. Yeah, we all live in this world of too much to do and not enough to get it done. I wish, Nathan, we could have a little deeper conversation about this, because I'd love to know specifically what kind of research you're talking about. As many of you probably know, when we talk about research, two primary reasons we conduct research. And one of those reasons is to learn things we weren't aware of, discover things, generally, probably commonly referred to as qualitative research or discovery, uncovering things that we then become aware of, the aha moment. If I related this, to the world of science, for instance, we have scientists who simply observe things. Astronomers observe the heavenly bodies, or physicists who observe the physical universe. And based on their observations and based on their studies, they start to say, aha, what's that? What's that about? What's going on there? What's that? That doesn't make sense to me. And they start to draw hypotheses. And then you move to another kind of research, which says, I think I know something. I believe something is true. Now I got to go prove it. I got to go validate it. I got to explore that, starting with a premise and trying to prove it, disprove it, the quantitative kind of an approach. So my question to you, if we were sitting down having a cup of coffee, Nathan, was what exactly are you talking about? But I'll just answer you generically. I'll just tell you that from a Pragmatic Institute perspective, one of the things we teach, specifically because of your question, the more research you do, both of a qualitative nature and a quantitative nature, the smarter you're going to be. The more informed you're going to be, the more equipped you're going to be, the more confident you're going to be in your information and the decisions you make based on that information. However, the reality is you can't just sit there and suffer from analysis paralysis. You can't just sit there and just keep doing research and research and research and looking at stuff and looking at data and looking at numbers, looking at studies, and never actually get to delivering something. So where's that point where we're comfortable enough? So we recommend our favorites. Our favorite way of learning things we don't know is really simple. It's conducting discovery within the markets we serve through two primary methods, and that's conversation and observation. So both in terms of observing and immersing ourselves in our market to understand what's going on in our market, as well as talking to people about their frustrations and trouble and problems and things they're looking for help with. That's a great way to discover, look for patterns. And when I think I've heard or seen something enough for the aha to say, that seems to be something I keep hearing. Then when I want to quantify that, I could use any number. I could use data analytics. If I have access to data scientists, if I know something about going out and grabbing large amounts of data and organizing it and looking at that information to give me confidence or confirmation of my assumptions. Secondarily, a pretty basic and affordable tool would be quantitative tools like surveying, online surveys where you can send the surveys out constructed with questions and selections to confirm or support your hypothesis. Simple questions. Do you have this need? Right? Is this a challenge for you? Here's a list of 5 things. What's most important to you? Rank them from 1 to 5. Would you agree with the following statement? Do you have budget to deal with these issues? And you send that kind of quantitative research tool to a much broader audience, to a large audience, and start to look at that data. But I will say, in terms of starting out being resourced, and the reason we like those two methods is they're cheap and they're fast. I mean, literally, you could come in and start dialing for dollars. You could spend a good piece of your day for a couple of days reaching out to people in your market and saying you have time for a 20, 30-minute, 40-minute conversation. You could observe. You could solicit opportunities to visit people in your market. And if it's a consumer market, you certainly could do it via online platforms, things like that. Then once you start to see the pattern, you then can automate kind of the surveying, the quantitative side of it to get some real data, and then you move forward. I will just say, I don't know I was ever satisfied in my research to indicate I had 100% certainty of anything. but I don't think you need 100% certainty to move forward. I think you need enough confidence um, that you move forward with minimal risk, realizing you could learn something tomorrow that changes everything. I hope
Hey,
that's a
Rich,
helpful
I
answer for you,
see
Nathan.
Alika has her hand raised over there. Alika, did you want to unmute and ask a clarifying question there?
Yes. So the clarifying question is, in a B2B space, talking with clients, sometimes they actually don't know they might know what their need is. But I guess my point is, I've seen enough around, this is nothing against clients, whether they're potentials or evaluators, but I don't think they're always representing things, like there's some kind of, I just call it like an error rate, with even data you might be getting from these conversations with them. What's your thoughts around that and adjusting for that?
Yeah, so Alika, thank you for the question. If I understand the point you're making, that's why we wouldn't rely on a single conversation. That's why single conversations are interesting. They're data points. The question is, can we find patterns? I know I'm often asked the question from people in product roles, what kinds of skills are really valuable to people in the world of products, product management, product marketing? One of my first answers out of my mouth when I advise companies, pattern identification. We deal in solving needs of markets, not individuals. And the chances that someone is frustrated with something, that same frustration is being experienced by others is generally pretty high. My experience tells me it's pretty high. Here's the thing that can be really challenging. People aren't really good at articulating necessarily what their problem is. It's like pulling teeth. There's a lot of complaints, there's a lot of suggestions, there's a lot of wish lists, there's a lot of, and fundamentally, what you want to say to these people who are having trouble articulating these things is why. Why are you asking me to do that? Why is that a problem for you? Why does that frustrate you? The real challenge, and I think what separates great market knowledge from just okay market knowledge, the thing you have to realize is you can't say why. Certainly not to your customers. I mean, the answer, I don't know if any of you have ever played this game, but I remember my kids, when they were younger, they played the why game. You tell them to do something and they say, why? And you say, well, let me try to explain why. And then if they answer that with, yeah, but why? Eventually you get to the point where you just say, because I told you to, right? I'm daddy. I said, do it. That's why. I'm not going to explain this anymore. Just do it. And quite frankly, in some senses, that's what customers will do to you at some point. If you keep pushing the why, they say, because I said so. I'm your customer. I said so. Just do it. So we really have to develop a skill of asking why without asking why, without being challenging, without being confrontational. We have to learn how to say why. And just there are a lot of techniques to do that. I don't know that we have the time here to get into all of them, but just as an example, when someone were to say to you, I want you to do something, I want you to move that field, I want you to add this feature, whatever that request might be, a response, something like this, which is, that's interesting. I don't think there might be a problem doing that. I think that's something we could look at. Do you mind if I asked you, just because I'm curious, after I do that for you, which immediately puts them at ease, after I do that for you, and I come back to see you in 6 months, what will have changed? What will change 6 months from now? And now that conversation is going to be, well, look at all the things I'm now able to do. Look at all the things I no longer have to do. Look at what went away. Look at the capabilities. And now I got it. I understand. Problem. But it's not natural. I tell my classes, I've been teaching this stuff for quite a while. And I tell my classes almost always, don't expect people to just line up and say, here's a whole pile of problems for you to solve for me. It's buried. You have to become a real, you have to have a curious mind. I sometimes say a throwaway line, but I'd ask you all to adopt it. Product management, product marketing, it isn't about having all the answers. It's about asking all the questions. That's what it's about. So you have to get good at it. You have to practice it. You use some of these techniques, and it's amazing what you can learn. I hope that was helpful. I hope I answered your question, Malika.
Brilliant. All that stemmed from Nathan's question. Nathan just got a master class to answer his question. That was fantastic. How about, and if you're just joining, we had a few people pop in just recently. Welcome. Good to have you. If you have a question, stick it over there in the chat. You're also welcome to unmute and jump in with a question or a clarifying if you would like to. But I do have another one over here from Kenneth for you, Rich. Kenneth asks, have you ever run into a situation where you were pigeonholed into a certain field as a product manager simply because it's where you started? I'm trying to branch out to a new product field, but so many companies won't consider me because my experience is not in their specific field. It's getting typecast, Rich. What can you do about that?
Well, I'll be honest. Who asked the question again?
This is Kenneth.
Kenneth, thank you for the question if you're here. I'm not sure I can give you a specific answer to that question. I know it's not uncommon what you describe. And I think there are two components that people look for. And I think this is a debate, which is a debate worth having. I think it's a debate that goes on in the industry. And that is, what is the mix needed to be successful in our product team between specific domain knowledge and general skills knowledge? And so, for instance, does it make sense for me to hire somebody who's a skilled product manager and bring them into my domain and teach them my domain? Or does it make sense for me to find somebody who has a deep level of domain expertise and bring them in and train them how to be a product manager? And I think reasonable people could have a different opinion on that, have a different perspective on that. And perhaps you have been unfortunate enough to run into many people who are looking for the second, high degrees of domain knowledge as the most valuable component. I would urge you to continue to look for people who have perhaps the other view. And maybe a suggestion to you is to find emerging, innovative, younger, smaller companies who are looking for people perhaps with more weight on the product management skills side of things, less on the domain. I can just tell you that it happens. It happens all the time. My personal opinion, which is only my personal opinion, I always opted, and before I joined Pragmatic, I had over 20 years in the technology world and mostly in the world of product. I looked for people with product management skills. And my understanding, my feeling was that I could train them in my products. I could train them in my domain. I could put them through that kind of intense thing. But the fundamental skills of product management were things that were harder for people to get good at. Now, I know there are reasonable and intelligent people who have a different opinion than that. But just to give you just a quick anecdote, my first job in technology, I had not been in the technology world. As a matter of fact, I came out of the world of wholesale distribution. And I actually had been in purchasing and in fulfillment for a wholesale distributor in the pharmaceutical world. I'd done that for a number of years. And after some soul searching about my career, I was advised maybe I wanted to become a consultant. And so I started to look for jobs where I could join a technology company in a consulting role. And I started to interview for these jobs, and a very large software company at the time had an opening for an implementation consultant. I had never seen their software. I had never been an implementation consultant. Their software supported manufacturing environments, which is not what I did. I was from a distribution environment. And I went for the interview for the job, and I sat with the hiring manager. And I want to say 30 minutes into the interview, the manager said, I'd like to offer you this job. And this is after I had gotten a lot of unsuccessful interviews. I'll add that. He said, I'm going to offer you this job. And believe it or not, and this is a long, long time ago, but believe it or not, my response was, I really appreciate that. I'm awesome. Let's talk about the job. But do you mind if I ask you before we do that, why would you possibly offer me this job? I don't know your system. I'm not in manufacturing. I've never done consulting. Why would you offer me this job 40 minutes? And he looked across the table to me and he said, you're a consultant. I'll teach you everything you need to know about my system, about our market. I can't teach skills that you have naturally, intuitively, and I'll shape you for our company. But that's what I'm looking for. And that gentleman never left my mind. I adopted that kind of an approach when I became a hiring manager. And that's the best advice I can give you. Stay true to what you are. Don't overstate what you can do. Keep knocking on doors. And there's a slot for you out there. You'll find it.
Rich, it sounds like maybe Kenneth is going to want to come work for you.
I'm not
You're the guy
hiring
he's
right
looking
now,
for.
Kenneth. We have a pandemic here, buddy.
Yeah. So your advice there would be not be to use the usual story of, the actor's advice when the director asks, "Can you ride a horse?" You always answer yes, and then go learn how to ride a horse. You should not overstate your qualifications. You should be honest. I'm not experienced in this area, but look how great I am as a product manager.
I'm not a fan of maybe it's me, but I always felt they were going to sniff me out in just a minute anyway.
Sure.
So why look bad doing that? That's just my advice.
Fantastic. Here is another question from Seth. Seth asks, I am a front-end developer looking to get into product management. I was curious what you think makes a good product and what are some of your favorite products and why? That's a broad question.
Wow.
Rich, tell us your favorite products ever.
I'm extremely fond of electricity.
Good one. Good one. I use it.
That was a good one. It was widely adopted. What do I think makes a good product? That's a really easy one for me. A great product is one that does things better than I would have asked for. That's what a great product is. I often teach my classes. I hope everybody will take this with the respect I mean it. I don't mean to offend I never want to offend anybody, but I'm just going to say this directly. It doesn't really take a genius to respond to people's requests. To have people lined up and dump a pile of requests on you and you just weed through those requests one after the other. I mean, what did you add to the party? You were a list keeper. When we start to talk about innovation, when we start talking about breaking the mold, when we start talking about disrupting markets, when we talk about companies that come out of nowhere to take things over, it's because they've done something different. And often it's not something somebody asked for. I don't know that anybody asked for Netflix. Everybody seemed to be renting movies left and right at Blockbuster. They were out there, right? They were in the corner store. It was happening. I don't know anybody asked for that. But along comes this thing and you look at it and go, wow, that's better than I would have asked for. I often tell people, I loved my Motorola Razr. Anybody here old enough to remember the Motorola Razr phone? I mean, that thing was cool, man. It came in 3 colors. It was super thin. You flip that baby open. It looked like something you get in a James Bond would use. I mean, it was like, yeah, that thing's cool. Everybody I loved that product till I saw an iPhone. Then I saw an iPhone. I looked at that Razr. I was like, not that good. Right, look what that does. I don't know if any of you will remember this, but I remember, believe it or not, the iPhone is 13 years old. The original iPhone was introduced about 13 years ago, which shouldn't be surprising. They just launched the iPhone 12, and they do about one a year. So 13 years ago was the launch of the original iPhone. And I don't know if anybody else even remembers it, but I remember the first time I saw it. And the first time I saw it was on a television commercial. and it was an Apple ad that they ran, and all it was, there was no soundtrack. There was music. There was music playing. There were two hands. One was holding an iPhone. The other was touching the screen. And the entire commercial was they had maps. They had a search window open, and they typed in pizza. And then they hit enter. Now remember, no talking, just music. And then a map came up and a bunch of pins dropped. And then the hand touched one of the pins. And a dialog box opened up, and I think it said, stereotypically, Giuseppe's Pizza. And it had an address and a phone number. And then the finger touched the phone number. And the phone changed from the map to the phone, said, calling Giuseppe's Pizza. End of commercial. It was 30 seconds. Watching the finger touch the screen 3 times. And at the end of that, I looked at that, and I remember looking at my Motorola phone, go, why don't you do that? You need to do that. That's what I want. Now, I don't know that that came from anybody asking for it. I think great products are a mixture of understanding what people are trying to accomplish, the goals, the outcomes, and then applying real innovation, real better ways of solving those things, providing those things, better, different, faster, cheaper. And I think that's what makes a great product. So I look at some of the things that were transformational in different areas as being stupendous products. I mean, if you really ask me what I think are great products, we could go down the consumer trail. We could talk about things like the iPhone, but certainly MRIs, medical technology that allows us to look inside the body and cure diseases, microsurgery. I mean, these came from innovative thinking and applying that knowledge to really solve the problem in a better way for all of us. Those are my favorite products.
Hey, I've got this is Alika. I've got a clarifying question for you on that.
Go ahead.
What do you think about, I've kind of been working with our corporate strategy group about doing some kind of white space mapping to look at underserved or unserved markets. What do you think about kind of a white space mapping activity? Do you think it adds value? Because I'm kind of new to white space mapping.
So I'm not extremely familiar with that term specifically, Alika. But if what we're talking about is looking into markets we don't currently serve, is that what we're talking about, is white space?
Yeah, well, it's markets we either are that are being underserved right now. So it's existing markets of ours either being underserved, or the other point is an unserved market might be an adjacent market that, we have potential to play in.
So I think it's a really valuable exercise for a business whose outcome is to do market expansion as their strategy. So we teach, and of course, I think it's pretty much common sense, that as we move through a business, we have different levels of strategic planning and different levels of objectives, some of them more high level and corporate in nature, some of them all the way down specifically to a product strategy in a particular market. And that these strategies up and down a business have to be aligned. So if the overall objective of the business is that we want to grow our business, we want to increase our market cap by expanding into other markets, expanding our product lines, expanding our presence, which has all kinds of ramifications. It has ramifications of sales channels. It has ramifications of marketing. It has ramifications of different kinds of buyers. It has ramifications on the competitive landscape. It has ramifications on what our competencies are and what we're good at. But assuming that analysis is done and we've said, okay, we believe the way to grow this company is to move into new fertile ground that we haven't been in, that hasn't really been tapped into, then going out and doing that kind of discovery about what are their needs and where do our competencies aligned to their needs and what are the opportunities for us to go in there and deliver real value to them. I think that's an awesome exercise. And it's, I would just give you a word of caution, and that is that you will go down a lot of trails that lead nowhere. And you have to be willing to say, I could find, I could start picking crumbs up and realize, no, that's not a trail we need to go down. But I love that notion if that's the corporate strategy, as opposed, say, to a corporate strategy that said we want to do mergers and acquisitions, or we want to have customer retention, we want market share growth. That wouldn't be an exercise I would invest in if market share growth was the way I wanted to increase my business. But certainly,
I think mergers and acquisitions, it's part of your strategic mix, but everybody knows mergers and acquisitions takes money, right? Expanding to a new market and testing that and piloting it is a lot cheaper than doing a merger and acquisition.
The only point I was making, not necessarily the specifics of my example, was as long as it aligns with the overall corporate strategy set for the business, it's a really worthwhile activity. Those decisions about which strategy for the business, that's above my pay grade.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Yep.
Thank you, Alika. Good questions. And I appreciated a second ago, we had a comment from Debbie who says our goal should be not just meeting expectations, but shaping expectations, which is exactly what those companies like Apple were doing with the iPhone. Nobody knew they needed that. Or Netflix, nobody knew they needed that. Shaping the actual expectations. Now, of course, Rich, they're not just making up problems from thin air. They are solving actual problems, but these are just problems that people didn't know they had, right?
Well, actually, Eddie, I would argue slightly, surprise, Eddie. I would argue slightly with your wording of that.
Okay.
Because I'm a believer. I often have this debate with students. We hear terms like creating demand. And I'm a huge believer that says you can't create demand. Demand must exist. You can't create that. You can't tell somebody they have a problem they don't have. So that's where I draw the line of saying they didn't know they had it. They knew they had it. The question is, did they learn to live with it? Was it good enough? Was it partially solved? Did they just put it on the back burner until they see something that goes, aha, I don't need to live with this anymore. Finally, somebody's gotten around to something. So I think there's a slight difference in that approach. And I think you can create demand for a solution, but I don't think you can create market demand for something you've built if it doesn't really deliver value by meeting a need of that market that they don't have.
Right.
Create
inside out thinking.
So I don't know who's right or wrong, but that's my approach.
We're all right together.
Thank you, Pamela. Pamela gave me agree 100%. Thank you.
There you go. Thanks, Pamela.
I love the positive reinforcement.
Here's a question from Dylan for you, Rich. Dylan asks, we have recently transitioned to remote full-time. Welcome to the club, Dylan. And I find myself and my colleagues struggling on how to keep everyone informed on product changes. Sure, we have shared docs, bi-weekly meetings, etc. Is there a better way to keep everybody informed on product changes, Rich?
Yeah, I wish I could give you a great answer on that. I'll tell you something. There is no one who's had to adjust more to what is our current reality than somebody like me. My normal job was to get on an airplane and fly all over the world and stand in front of a room full of people teaching. And here I am where Zoom has become my classroom, and it's a virtual. Just yesterday, I taught a class, and I had students in the class who were in New Zealand and Australia and Prague and California and all over the US, and we had India. So interestingly, I think I appreciate your question and the problem that you're experiencing, but I will share this with you. I don't know what your experience is. Anybody, feel free to chime in. My experience is people are more accessible. People seem to be respond to invitations for these kinds of sessions. They don't seem to stand them up. I've been in meetings where people just don't show up. These, they seem to show up, right? They mute, they're sitting there typing, they're not paying any attention, but they're there. So I think using Slack channels, social media platforms, whatever your corporate communication protocols are, it's definitely, and this is me editorializing, I don't want to impose my opinion on you. I think the consensus is it's not as good. It's not a substitute. There's something about being able to actually see people and talk to people in the hallway conversations and that kind of thing. But nonetheless, I'm not exactly sure in your question what you're having trouble communicating. I would say this. If you're doing the equivalent, and this has nothing to do with our distributed world due to the pandemic, but if you were an entity where your main communication vehicle was SharePoint, I guarantee you nobody was getting any of your communication then. I used to call SharePoint the system where documents go to die, right? Put it on SharePoint, you're pretty much guaranteed nobody's going to find it. Nobody's going to look for it. So I'm not sure I experienced the same struggles you may be. And
there goes our Microsoft sponsorship, Rich.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with the tool. It has to do with the people using it. And Eddie posts almost everything in SharePoint. I should tell you that right out of the
Not
shit.
by choice. Not by choice.
And I can't find anything, Eddie, but that's another problem. So I'm not sure exactly the specifics. I wish, again, we could have a more detailed conversation about what you're struggling with, but just do the best you can. Utilize. I encourage people, turn on the camera, turn on the mic. Let's try to make this a human experience. I want to see your face. I want to see your body language. I want to see the expressions you make involuntarily that tell me how you're really feeling. That's great. But look, this is the reality we live in today. It's a struggle for everybody, and that's just one more struggle we'll put on the pile. I don't have a magic answer for you. I'm sorry.
Good answer, though. Good answer, though, Rich. How about this one from Wesley? Wesley says, I keep hearing that managing up is really important for product managers. Do you have some suggestions on how to do this? And more importantly, if there are any opportunities that can come out of doing it? Managing up, we got the soft skills question here, Rich.
And I think it's a critical soft skill. I really appreciate the question. Thank you. Managing, and by the way, I offer this advice. I do some mentoring. So I'm involved in some programs where I mentor people who are just starting out in their careers. And when I work with the people who I serve as a mentor for, I offer this advice regardless of what their specific field is, product management or otherwise. Managing up is an important skill to have in a hierarchical organization. And businesses are hierarchical in nature. And the reason it's so important to be able to manage up is that the people above you in an organization have more inputs than you. There are other voices, there are other inputs, not always with a consistent message or story. And so managing up is the ability to be heard, to be acknowledged, and to have an impact. I mean, the outcomes have an impact. Our job, I often tell product people, with very rare exceptions, product teams don't get to make final decisions. We don't get to decide what we build or don't build. We don't get to decide where the dollars go, where the people go. People we work for decide that. The best we can do is help them make the right decisions for everybody, for the business, for all of us to participate in that success. So I sometimes share a quotation from Jeff Bezos. I don't know that we listen to Jeff enough. He's done okay. Last I checked. Jeff Bezos famously said, every single thing we've done at Amazon started with a customer and worked its way back. We didn't come up with any idea. Everything started with our customers, which I greatly admired that statement. But he made this statement. He said, and I'm paraphrasing here, the great thing about making fact-based decisions is they will overrule the hierarchy. And I think what Mr. Bezos was saying in that instance, have you ever tried to argue with somebody who actually knows what they're talking about? How frustrating is that? Because you got emotions and passion and you're articulating, advocating, and they just look at you like, what are you getting excited about? Here's the data. So here's my advice to you in managing up. Know what you're talking about. Have the data. Know how these people listen. What's going to impact the people who you have to manage up? Do they want data? Do they want stories? Do they want names, places, dates? Do they want real instances? Learn how to communicate effectively. Learn what will actually land on them and influence them. And then be prepared to back things up. Be prepared to back things up by doing the hard work of knowing what you're talking about. That's not easy. It's a lot easier, opinions are free. Go, start throwing opinions. I'm not sure they're that valuable. What you want to share are judgments, informed judgment based on weighing the pros and the cons, having information, and making it a data-based conversation. Now, certainly, I would encourage you to present data, present information, and then finish it up by saying, look, based on that information, here's my conclusion. Here's where that led me. It could lead you somewhere else. I'll share the underlying data with you, and we could agree to disagree. But here's where that took me. And that's what I would recommend. And the outcomes can be profound, managing up. Eddie, do we have time? I'll share a quick anecdote about this.
Yeah, we got a few minutes left. Go ahead.
I was driving one weekend a number of years ago. I was driving around and my cell phone rang. And when I got the call, a number came up with an area code I didn't recognize. And it wasn't anybody in my contact list, so I didn't know who was calling me. And normally I wouldn't even answer that. I'd let it go to voicemail, but I was in the car and I picked the phone up. I said, hello, this is Rich. And a voice at the other end said, Rich, I didn't expect to get you in person. I thought I'd get your voicemail. And I said, well, I can hang up. You can call back. You want to talk to me? Here I am. And they said, no, I got you. He said, you won't remember who I am. I was a student in one of your classes about 8 months ago. And he said, I just wanted to share something with you. He said, I took a class where you taught us about business planning, about submitting ideas to management in a business plan to get approval. And when I got back to work, he said, I don't know if you recall me, but I was in a company that had just been acquired by a larger company. And my product in our company was a stepchild. We had a big cash cow product that wasn't mine. I had a little tiny product that was an ancillary product, and I never got any attention. I just kept it going. I always believed that product was underserved. I believed if we would make an investment in the product, we could have much more revenue. We could take this product somewhere. But I never got any oxygen in the room. So when the acquisition happened, the new owners came in. We're having a series of meetings. And I took the opportunity to say to them, I have a product that's not why you bought us. I know you bought us for the big product, but we have this product. And I don't think we've done all we could do for it. I think there's a market for this. And the new owner said, well, put a case together, put an argument together and bring it to us. We'll look at it. So he said, I started to use the company's templates in order to put a business plan together. And I thought to myself, wait a minute, I just took this Pragmatic course. Maybe I should go look at some of the things I learned there and see if they apply. And he said, I used our company's templates and I pretty much looked at the stuff you suggested. And I found that most of the things you had suggested were already in our company templates, but there were a couple of things not there. And I decided to add them. So I went ahead and kind of followed the method that we learned. And I put together a business plan. And when it was together, I contacted the new owners and said, I put something together. I'd like to share it with you. And he said, I had a PowerPoint presentation, had some numbers, had some other information, and I had the opportunity to present it to them. He said, I went in and I started to present it, and they saw it was a PowerPoint. They all rolled their eyes up in their heads like, oh boy, here we go. And he said, I was on about slide 3 when some of the new management team said, hold it, just hold it. Why don't we just have a conversation? We're going to ask you a question. You give us the answer. And he said, I got asked a question and I was able to go click. I went to the next slide. There was the answer to their question. And then someone else in the room threw a question at me and I went click. And the next slide in the deck answered their question. And he said, Rich, I'm going to tell you what happened. He said, I'm going to tell you this because I was watching the clock. They had only given me 30 minutes. 23 minutes into my presentation, the CFO of the company said, write this guy a check. This is a no-brainer. Let's do this. And I walked out of that room with the approval to go ahead and move this product forward. He said, but let me tell you what I really walked out of that room with. It was like people in my company said, what the hell did you do? What did you do? What did you go in there and tell them? They don't make any decision until they want to know what you think of it. They're asking me my decision on other products. They're asking my decision on portfolio investments. They're asking my decision about market expansion. He said, I've been elevated in the eyes of management as somebody that was valuable to talk to get input from before they made decisions. And it not only changed the fortunes of my product, it changed the fortunes of my career. That's an absolutely true story. And my answer to him was, thanks for the call. Why don't you write an article for our magazine? That's what I'd really like. Tell other people this story. I couldn't even tell you his name. I do know he was in LA, but that's all I remember. But that's managing up. That's managing up.
There you have it, folks. Wesley, got more than your money's worth there. The masterclass from Rich Natinsky. There it is again. Rich, we are out of time.
Wow.
This has been
Already?
fantastic. I'm going to wrap us up here, but if we didn't get to any questions that you have previously submitted, we do keep those till next time. So join us again next time and we'll get to your questions then again. But thank you so much, our Zoom audience, for joining us. So good to see your faces in here. Our YouTube live audience, hello out there in TV land. So glad that you joined us as well. If you're looking for more, join us Tuesday, October 27th, 1:30 p.m. We will welcome Robbie Kelman Baxter, who is the subscription expert and best-selling author, and will come and discuss how to build subscription products so compelling your customers will never want to leave. That's the 27th, 1:30 Eastern Time for our product chat series. And of course, if you still can't get enough of us, every Friday for the Ask Me Anything with a Pragmatic Institute instructor, 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time here on Zoom. And in the meantime, happy Friday, everybody. Have a fantastic weekend. Stay safe. We will see you again next time, gang. Thanks, Rich.